Today we will discuss ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome and how to prevent it. You might have attended lot many conferences, and in all the conferences the speakers are constantly talking about ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, and which is making you uh, stressful and tense while doing stimulation. But believe me, if you titrate the dose properly, if you give the gonadotropin in the right dose, if you use the correct protocol, if you stimulate in a correct way, the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome is, except a very mild ovarian hyperstimulation, it is not very frequent. So, there are three types of ovarian hyperstimulations. Uh, the uh, the intensity or severity, you can say. When there is a mild ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, which is very common in hyperstimulation, the patient may complain of abdominal pain, which is mild in nature. And if you do a sonography, the size of the ovary is less than 8 centimeter. If this pain becomes moderate, if it is associated with the GI symptoms like nausea or diarrhea, if you do a sonography, if there is free fluid present in the pouch of Douglas and ovary are between 8 to 12 centimeter, these patients are labeled as moderate ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. You must recognize the severe OHS. So anytime during ovarian stimulation or after the stimulation, if you come across the clinical ascites, there is a oliguria. If you do the blood testing and PCV is more than 45%, WBC more than 15,000, LFT liver function tests are abnormal, and if you do if you do a sonography transvaginal, and if you find that sonography ovarian size are more than 12 centimeter, these patients are labeled as severe ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. Now, how to prevent the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome? At the time of ovarian stimulation, if you anticipate that this patient is likely to go for ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, you should start cabergoline on the evening of trigger in the dose of 0.5 milligram daily for 8 days. You can start short-term metformin, especially in PCOS cases, till ovum pickup, which also improves the pregnancy outcome and reduces the risk of OHS. Apart from the cabergoline, the 1000 ml of Hesteril at ovum pickup and 500 ml 48 hours later when OHS is suspected. Besides that, IV calcium gluconate 10 ml in 200 ml normal saline daily for 3 days from the ovum pickup, which acts through renin-angiotensin system and makes the difference in the alters the permeability in the vasculature. If the patient, irrespective of the patient, whether it is agonist protocol or antagonist protocol, the antagonist can be given for 7 days, even if it is an agonist cycle, and do not forget to freeze all the embryos. The primary ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome occurs within 8 days and secondary occurs in second week and if patient conceives. Most of the mild ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome can be treated on OPD base by keeping observation. What are the indications of admission of such patient? If they develop any sign of severe ovarian hyperstimulation, the patient require admission. Patients are unable to tolerate pain and distension, requires admission. If the patient has got dyspnea, the oxygen saturation falls, patient has got oliguria, this patient requires IV supplementation. So this patient requires admission. What are those patients who requires to be shifted in ICU? The all patient who has developed respiratory distress syndrome requires ICU admission. Those patients having renal shutdown, severe oliguria or anuria, there is no urine output, they requires ICU admission. Or if the patient has developed venous thrombosis or any other thromboembolic phenomena, they require ICU admission. Many times, to ease the patient, the tapping of the ascites is indicated. When the patient has got severe discomfort or severe dyspnea, tapping is a good idea. Apart from this, if there is oliguria which is refractory to a fluid replacement, these patients are benefited by tapping because of the fluid in the abdominal cavity which compresses the inferior vena cava, and because of that there is oliguria. So if you relieve the compression by tapping, the oliguria can be improved. After tapping, the albumin should be replaced immediately. What are the indications of albumin? One, as we discussed after tapping, and another, if there is a oliguria with hypoproteinemia, then albumin should be given. While treating the patient of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, you must keep watch on fluid intake. Patients should be advised to take the fluid according to their thirst. There should not be any exercise because these ovaries are enlarged and likely to be twisting if the strenuous exercise is done. NSAIDs should not be advised for the pain relief. These patients requires regular monitoring by advising complete blood CBC count, PEC cell volume, electrolytes, liver function test, daily weighing the patient, measuring the abdominal girth, and measuring the urine output. So this way, the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome is treated. The metformin treatment before and during in vitro fertilization or ICSI in women with a polycystic ovarian syndrome, the Cochrane concludes that in women with PCOS, metformin treatment before or during ART cycle significantly increases the clinical pregnancy rates and significantly decreases the risk of OHS. However, they did not find any conclusive evidence of a benefit in live birth weight. Now coming to a trigger criteria. If you are stimulating with any of the protocol, when will you give a trigger for the maturity induction of the oocytes. When there is at least two follicle more than 18 millimeter. There are some studies which recommends at least three follicle more than 17 millimeter and majority of the rest of the follicle more than 14 millimeter. So, depending on the follicular profile, you can follow any of these criteria. One day early or one day late trigger when the criteria are met does not compromise the results as per the study. So if you want to club the cases and if you have achieved the criteria for the trigger, if you can prepone for one day or you can postpone for one day without a compromise of the result. The early trigger is indicated when OHS is suspected, especially when lead follicle is 15 millimeter and there are more than 20 follicle, more than 10 millimeter in both ovaries, and peak E2 is more than 1500 picogram. The early trigger is indicated. When there was a progesterone elevation in last cycle, in the next cycle, trigger little bit early is recommended. There is one beautiful study which says that, and of course we come across such type of the cases some or other day, where the follicular growth is very rapid and trigger criteria are reached as early as 8th day of the stimulation. Even then, trigger should not be delayed, because even after reaching the criteria early as 8th day, if you cue the trigger, the results are not compromised. So, unnecessary there is a wrong notion in lot of IVF consultant that minimum 10 days stimulation is must. Then and then the trigger should be given. No, this is wrong. Now, what type of the trigger are used? Commonly SCG trigger is used and another is a agonist trigger. If you look at the agonist trigger, the FSH and LH surge after agonist trigger is short lasting, 4 hours ascending curve and 20 hours descending curve, compared to a natural LH surge, which is 14 hours rapid rise, 14 hours plateau, and 20 hours descending curve. So sometime 2 to 4 times 12 hours apart, agonist is suggested as a trigger for mimicking a natural surge for the better response. We do practice this couple of times. The trigger, various preparation and doses as a trigger. If you want to use Lupride 2 milligram, if you want to use Decapeptyl 0.2 milligram, and if you want to use Buserelin 1 milligram is the ideal dose for trigger. There are a lot of confusion about the different agonist preparation, but the studies have shown that the different agonists have the same efficacy as a trigger. Many times the agonist trigger there is a fear of agonist trigger failure. When a many center, after giving agonist trigger, they keep watch on LH level 10 hours after the agonist trigger. If it is less than 15 international unit, then there are chances of agonist failure. We normally in our center always use dual trigger, means we combine concomitant agonist with the low dose SCG 1200 international unit of SCG, except when confirmed ovarian hyperstimulation is there, peak E2 is more than 4000, then we use pure agonist trigger. Otherwise, in all cases, we use a dual trigger, which takes care of failure of the agonist trigger. If the E2 is less than 4000, the dual trigger can be very well given without significantly increasing the chances of OHS. But if the E2 is more than 4000, as we discussed, the agonist trigger to be given and either freeze all embryos or intense luteal support is required. Now coming to a SCG trigger efficacy. After giving SCG trigger, how do you confirm whether this trigger has acted or not? The morning after the SCG trigger, beta SCG should be measured, and if it is more than 5 milli-international unit per ml, if it is not, repeat the SCG trigger and delay ovum pickup for 24 hours. Many a time with SCG, some center prefer to give FSH bolus injection at the time of SCG trigger, which gives same effect of agonist trigger on oocyte quality. Because why agonist trigger gives better maturity of the oocyte? It is because of the FSH flare. Because FSH facilitates the LH receptor on the granulosa cells, so LH trigger can act in a better way, plus the maturity, FSH helps in the maturity of the oocytes. So the same thing can be mimicked if you combine SCG trigger with the FSH bolus. Now those who are using long protocol, compulsorily they have to use SCG trigger or recombinant SCG or recombinant LH trigger. As SCG is the most economical option and quite effective, we use the SCG standard as a trigger. But we use slide scale dose for the SCG trigger. So if we suspect that the response is less number of follicle, and E2 is less than 1500, we give full dose, that is 10,000 of SCG as a trigger. If we suspect that OHS is most likely to occur and peak E2 level is more than 3000, then we give 3300 unit as a trigger. And those E2 in between 1500 to 3000, we give 4000 or 5000 unit as a SCG trigger. Now why the agonist trigger doesn't work sometime? Why there is some suboptimal response to a agonist trigger in IVF. First, how we define a suboptimal response. If the level of the serum LH is less than 15 milli-international unit, progesterone less than 3 nanogram after 8 to 12 hours of agonist trigger, we consider this as a suboptimal response. Another alternative, simpler way is to test with the urinary LH kit, which has almost similar sensitivity. The chances of suboptimal response to agonist trigger are more if the patient is young donor on prolonged OC pill, there is a profound down-regulated cycle, there was a long stimulation with the more of gonadotropin use. In this type of the patient, suboptimal response should be suspected and you should be vigilant, and after giving the agonist trigger, next day morning you must test urine for the urinary LH urinary LH kit. If it is negative, better to repeat or better to give SCG as a rescue and delay the ovum pickup for 36 hours. The chances, if you suspect when the basal LH, this chances of suboptimal response to be suspected when the basal LH level at the initiation of the stimulation was less than 0.5 to 1 international unit and less than 0.5 international unit on the trigger day. How do we say the luteinization of the follicle has occurred? The partial luteinization of the granulosa cells due to small or short LH surge are not detectable by measuring LH level, and it causes progesterone elevation. The progesterone is elevated more than 2 nanogram, then you should suspect premature luteinization of the follicle. The chances of premature luteinizations are up to 35% in agonist protocol and up to 38% in antagonist protocol. Now we will discuss progesterone elevation on the trigger day in the next talk. Thank you.